God made the world and all its wonders for man to explore. And there are countless wonders just outside your front door. Now join natural world photographer and journalist Roger W. Downs as he shares the stories of the people, places, music, and cuisines he has discovered as we explore with RWD.
Welcome on in. I'm your host, Roger W. Downs. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've ever thought about going to the Grand Canyon, there is so much more to it than just standing at the rim's edge and taking a photo with your sweet thing and saying, hey, we were here. If you're gonna go, you really need to immerse yourself not only in the fauna and flora, but also the cultures. And we're going to learn about all of that today with the Grand Canyon Conservancy Director of Marketing and Communications, Mindy Riesenberg. So one of the top questions that I get when people visit the Great Smoky Mountains National Park or the Pisgah National Forest or the Blue Ridge Parkway is, where are the best kept secrets in this forest? So Mindy, where are the best kept secrets in the canyon?
Grand Canyon Conservancy, we're actually the nonprofit partner of Grand Canyon National Park. So we fund all of these really cool things that happen at the park, including things like our artist and astronomer in residence program. I don't know if people know that they can come to the park and there might be a resident on site showing them things through a telescope at the stars, watching people create beautiful dance projects or artworks. But when it comes to the actual views of Grand Canyon, even though you said it, we're known for our views, one of my favorite places to see is Shoshone Point, which is very, very well kept secret at Grand Canyon. Very few people know how to find this unmarked trail. It's off of Desert View Drive, and you walk through open forest, and all of a sudden it opens up into this 180-degree vista that is just spectacular, and very few people know about it. So it's a great place to really take in the canyon without a lot of people around you.
Wow. Now that we've mentioned it, everybody's going to go there.
Well, I didn't say where the exact, where the trail is.
Well, those are some of the best kept secrets, and I know that there's probably a lot of other trails because the Grand Canyon is massive. How big of a park is it?
Oh my God, we have like over 400 miles of Colorado River running through the canyon. We have over 400 miles of trails going through the canyon. It is just ginormous, and you can just get lost in it. And there's so many areas that people just never see because they're difficult to get to. But you can stand on the South Rim and look out towards the North Rim and get an idea of, how different that might be. You can see that the elevation is higher and that there's, pine trees up there. And it's a very different climate than where you're standing on the South Rim. So one of the really cool things I think about Grand Canyon is that there are so many different climates within it. I mean, because of the elevation changes, we have multiple microclimates. So you can be up at the top, hiking into the canyon, and it's icy and cold and snowy. And by the time you get to the bottom by the river, it's 65 degrees and sunny and people are sitting on the beach. It's amazing, the climates that you can go through.
So why is it warmer at the bottom of the canyon than it is at the top?
Well, the elevation changes have something to do with that. The South Rim is at about 7,000 feet. The North Rim is about 8,000 feet. So we are talking mountain environment, level heights. And then as you go down, you're going down several thousand feet. It is a steep descent into the canyon. And you're also blocked by a lot of the winds and things like that. Once you're down in the canyon walls, on the Colorado River, and these huge sheer cliffs are around you. Some of that weather is blocked, and it can be very warm down there. It's been 100 degrees down there in the summer. It's a dangerous hike.
So with that level of danger in mind, which most people can get through if they're prepared, what should they take with them, even for a quick day hike down into the canyon?
First, I'd like to say that Grand Canyon Conservancy actually supports a volunteer group. We're preventive search and rescue. So if you go into the canyon, you'll see these volunteers along the way that are there to help you. They are there to prevent something bad from happening. And they also will carry salty snacks with them. That's one of the things I highly recommend you bring. Salty snacks, water, but there are some water filling stations along Bright Angel Trail. There are none along South Kaibab. So you have to plan ahead. Know what trail you're taking, know what's on the trail. Let somebody know where you're going. One of the most important things before you leave, because once you drop below the rim, your cell service is gone. And if you tell someone where you're going and when you're expected to return, then you can have somebody call if you haven't come out, and they can call a ranger. And we have plenty of rangers and search and rescue folks that can come into the canyon and try to find you. So I would say that's probably number one, is let somebody know your itinerary. Bring water, salty snacks. My favorites are Fritos and Pringles.
Well, that right there makes me want to book the trip if I can eat Pringles while I'm down in the canyon. I love Pringles, although my doctor doesn't love me eating Pringles. But now I can say it's to save my life, Doc. And I can just see him rolling his eyes right now. But let's talk about the different ecosystems that are in the canyon. You alluded to it a little earlier. Can you share the different species that specifically call the canyon home?
Sure. We have over 400 species of birds. We have 91 species of mammals, 48 species of reptiles, including one of the really coolest ones, which is a pink rattlesnake, which you're really not going to see anywhere else. It is pink. And, we also have, sheep and mule and elk and, deer. And of course, the California condor, which is, a protected species. There has been a breeding program up at the Vermilion Cliffs, which is just to the east of Grand Canyon. And we have nests within the canyon and breeding pairs within the canyon. And, you go out there, and if you are lucky enough to see a California condor, the wingspan is 9 feet on these things. And they are amazing to see. But, I have been at Grand Canyon Conservancy for 5 years, and I've only spotted them twice. So they're very, very hard to spot. But the pink rattlesnake is a rare sighting also. So that's one of those things, when you're asking what's so unique about Grand Canyon and our species, that's another thing. If you see a pink rattlesnake, you'll know, because it looks like a rattlesnake, but it is actually pink. It really is the funniest thing. Stay away. It's still a rattlesnake. It can bite you. But you will see them, and people have seen them down at Phantom Ranch, down at the bottom. And then last year, I remember somebody actually saw one up on the South Rim, which is a rarity. They're usually down in the warmer environments.
And just for point of clarification, let me stress it is never good to harass a snake of any kind, especially if you're not familiar with the different types and breeds, pink or otherwise. It is best to keep your distance from any snake that you find in the wild. But minus taking those cautionary steps to keep yourself safe, once you hike down into the canyon, there are some amazing, awe-inspiring locations that you can visit. Mindy Riesenberg will touch on those when we come back.
Don't wander off now. Explore with RWD will be right back after this.
Hey, it's Roger W. Downs again, and minus being a podcast pro and having a face for podcasts, all joking aside, I'm also a natural world photographer who goes out of his way to help share God's artistry with you, from his creations of landscapes that are beautiful to the wildlife. And it would mean the world to me if you took a few moments today and just went and saw some of my images at rogerwdownsphotography.com. Again, that's rogerwdownsphotography.com. You can find the link in the description of this podcast.
Welcome back to Explore with RWD.
So if you're starting to think maybe I should plan a trip to the Grand Canyon this fall to see the different plant life and wildlife, don't forget about some of the attractions that await you at the bottom of the canyon. Once again, Grand Canyon Conservancy's Mindy Riesenberg.
Within Grand Canyon National Park itself, you can hike down to Phantom Ranch, which is a historic ranch that was designed by the architect Mary Coulter, who was one of the, big female architects at the beginning of the 20th century that, when women were not really doing architecture or allowed to do architecture. She designed that, as well as the Desert View Watchtower, which is out on the east side of the South Rim. So amazing work from a female architect in the 20s and 30s. And down at Phantom Ranch, you can hike down, you can camp, or you can stay in the cabins that are designed down there. It's right down on the Colorado River. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then you're at the confluence of North Kaibab Trail and the South Kaibab Trail. So you can hike in or out from the North Rim or the South Rim right there, which is fantastic. Another really interesting spot, if you're not a hardcore hiker, but you're training to hike, you still have to be a decent enough hiker, go halfway down the Bright Angel Trail. And there is an area that used to be called Indian Garden and is now being renamed Havasupai Gardens out of respect for the tribes that the land was taken from them by the National Park Service over 100 years ago. So that's being renamed Havasupai Gardens. There's a campground there as well. It's all of a sudden you come into this oasis of beautiful green trees and, sometimes there's some waterfalls and it's just a beautiful place. So I think what you were referring to is Havasupai Falls and the Havasupai tribe that live down in the canyon. They are not actually considered part of the national park. They are their own sovereign nation down there. So Grand Canyon Conservancy and Grand Canyon National Park don't control anything down there. That is completely run by the Havasupai Nation. And they have the beautiful turquoise waters and the waterfalls, but you can get there hiking into the canyon.
I've read about that, and it does have some beautiful spots. I know you have to register to get there. It's not just like,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to hike down there. You have to have permission and a pass, if I remember correctly.
Yes, you do. And same thing within the canyon to camp at Grand Canyon National Park. You need to have a permit for camping within Grand Canyon National Park. So if you plan to do, an overnight hike, make sure that you get a permit from the backcountry office with Grand Canyon National Park.
But speaking about passes and permits, I know in a lot of other parks and forests throughout the nation, they have started to issue out tickets and day passes to visitors because of the influx of people who are coming to the national parks and forests to escape the pandemic, because obviously you can get outside and be a little healthier and also not be so concerned about catching COVID. So is the Grand Canyon National Park planning on starting a ticketing process, or have they already?
No, we at this time have no plans to ticket or to time entrance or anything like that. What's interesting about Grand Canyon National Park is generally half of our visitors are from overseas, as opposed to some of the other parks within the United States. So during COVID, we lost a lot of our visitors, as opposed to going up in visitors like Zion and other places that have had record, Arches, record numbers. During COVID, our numbers went down. Now we're still very high. We're Grand Canyon National Park, but it halved the numbers that we had. So we don't have a reason to time tickets or to have, it's not overcrowded. It's actually a wonderful time to come visit Grand Canyon because there's fewer people than there were before. So, you're not going to hear the variety of languages spoken that you usually hear at Grand Canyon. But it's a quieter experience than it was before. So now's the time if you really do want to see Grand Canyon.
I think we're all calling StevensonTravelAdventures.com to book our trips, which, by the way, sponsors this podcast. But let's say you do get out into the Grand Canyon and you're a bit of an adventurer and you go off the beaten path and you get lost. What should you do in that situation?
First, I would say stay on the marked trails if you can. But if you get lost, if you happen to be on one of the trails that, like the Tonto Trail or Hermit, things that aren't as well marked or could have washouts, things like that, just, again, make sure that somebody knew what your itinerary was. And the timing that you thought that you were going to come out of the canyon, so that somebody can call for you. But if you are down there, what you can do is try to find your way to one of the ranger stations if you have an idea of where you are. There's a ranger station at Havasupai Gardens. There's a ranger station at Phantom Ranch down by the river. Now, a lot of people will try to go down to the river because they want water, right? So they're looking for that. But I highly advise you don't drink that unless you have a water filtration system, which can, because if you don't have that, you could also cause more problems. One of the best things, though, I recommend is a guide. It's a pocket-sized waterproof guide called How Not to Die at Grand Canyon. Great title. It is by Dr. Thomas Myers. He's a doctor who has worked at the clinic at Grand Canyon for years. He's also written the book Death in Grand Canyon, which is a very popular book about how all the different ways people have actually died at Grand Canyon, which fascinates people. But it's a waterproof guide, pocket size, and it has prevention and first aid tips, how to avoid hazards, what to look out for, information. You can actually get that on the Grand Canyon Conservancy website at grandcanyon.org. It's very inexpensive, and it's a really helpful tool to have with you especially if you're hiking alone. The main corridor trails, Bright Angel Trail, South Kaibab Trail, North Kaibab, you will generally have people come across you. But those are the marked trails that I suggest you stay on. There are search and rescue operations at Grand Canyon all the time. All the time. This is a regular occurrence. So, and the smart people, though, are the ones who left their itinerary, have enough water or water filtration system, have enough snacks with them, and something to cover them at night. It gets very cold. So, some sort of heat wrap with you as well. The biggest threat, though, to a lot of the hikers at Grand Canyon is summertime, because it gets so hot in the canyon. And so most of the rescues we have are heat related.
Again, make sure that you're prepared before you go into the Grand Canyon, and someone knows when you're leaving and when you're expected to return. But you can get more information again at grandcanyon.org to visit the Grand Canyon Conservancy website. Don't worry, I'll put it in the description of this podcast. But along with some great adventures and memories, the Grand Canyon is also home to multiple cultures. Again, Mindy Riesenberg.
There's 11 tribes that are actually associated with Grand Canyon National Park. And the current superintendent of the park, Ed Keeble, is working very, very hard to kind of repair some relations between the tribes and the Park Service because of the history of the Park Service. These were tribal members who had lived on this land and were forcibly removed to create a national park, right? And so a lot of them still either live around, live near, work for Grand Canyon, especially the Navajo and the Hopi tribes who are still in that area, the Wallapai, the Havasupai, the Paiutes who aren't even very, that are more in Utah. You've got the Zuni that are more in New Mexico, but they all have ties to Grand Canyon National Park. So we are working with them. Grand Canyon Conservancy is actually working with them, with the park, to create an intertribal cultural heritage site at Grand Canyon. It will be the first of its kind in the National Park Service. That will be an educational site out at Desert View that explains Grand Canyon, the connection to Grand Canyon from the viewpoint of each individual 11 tribes. So we have to work with 11 totally different nations to get this done. And it's a lot of work, but it's been worth it. And we've been working on it for several years now. And ground has broken on that area, and they are starting to get that ready. So that will be an area where you can really learn about each individual nation's connection to Grand Canyon. And there'll be demonstrators, there will be food, there will be music, there will be, jewelry, anything you can think of, and you can talk to people who actually are members of those tribes.
That sounds amazing. When will people like me be able to visit?
Well, COVID kind of put a crimp in that because we were supposed to break ground when COVID started, basically. There is an area, Desert View Watchtower, and there is the Desert View area, but the whole area is going to be reimagined and redone. So I'm hoping in the next 2 years that this is done. Like I said, they did break ground on the first part of it, and I know they're planning on building some of the new buildings. So hopefully in the next 2 years, if it's something you're interested in, it is supported by the members of Grand Canyon Conservancy. We are supporting this effort, and you can go to grandcanyon.org to find out more about it or to donate.
And I'm sure it'll have a lot of different history available to its visitors. However, and more importantly, how will this intertribal cultural heritage site benefit the 11 tribes?
The idea is to create an economic benefit to them by letting them sell their own wares, run whatever stores or sites we have up there instead of the park running it or Grand Canyon Conservancy, and also promoting tourism into the nation. So, you drive down the road from Desert View and you're in Cameron, which is on the Navajo Nation. You've got all the whole area surrounding Grand Canyon National Park is tribal land. And so encouraging the visits to the tribal lands is also going to be one of the things that we're going to be doing.
But what if you want to walk through the historical sites of the 11 tribes and be able to witness it and experience it yourself? There is a way to do that respectfully, and Mindy Riesenberg will explain after we return.
Explore with RWD. We'll be right back after this.
So are you ready to go on your own adventure? Hey, it's Roger W. Downs here again, and I use StevensonTravelAdventures.com exclusively to book my trips. Corey and his crew will take great care of you, and they will walk you through step by step on your adventure wherever you want to go. Plus, they'll do all the legwork so you can have time to do what you like. Stevenson Travel Adventures. Look them up now at StevensonTravelAdventures.com. Find the link in the description of this podcast.
That wasn't too bad, now was it? Welcome back to Explore with RWD.
As you make your way down into the Grand Canyon, you may very well come across some ruins or historical sites, but you must go through the proper channels to visit those sites. Mindy Riesenberg.
You can actually see ruins right down by Phantom Ranch. When you hike down along the river, when you cross the bridge, there's ruins right there that you can actually see. There are some panels within the canyon that you can see on some of the more difficult trails to get to. There are granaries that you can go to, that you can hike to. A lot of people do that off of the river trips. And so, our Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute takes people into the canyon and can show them some of these sites. We have hikes, we have river trips, we have classes, and we bring in experts in, history, geology, archaeology, who lead these trips. And there might be one that's specific to, tribal sites. There might be one that's specific to the geology of Grand Canyon. So there are ways for you to get up close and personal with these sites in a legal way through Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute.
Along with those historical hikes into the canyon, the Grand Canyon Conservancy offers other trips to help you truly discover what the canyon has to offer.
Since we're the partner of Grand Canyon National Park, our tours are actually officially sanctioned by the park. We work with the park to create the itineraries. So they are much more in depth than some of the other tours that you might get from other operators. And you can get some behind the scenes access that you might not get from other tour operators as well. You might meet some of the rangers and some of the people involved with the park if you're interested in that. So they're highly educational courses with lots of fun attached to them. And we do, multiple night backpacking trips for all different levels. So if you are a beginner Grand Canyon hiker, there are easier hikes. We have, service trips where you can actually do some a little bit more difficult hikes into the canyon with some of the staff of the canyon and help them on some science projects having to do with the flora and the fauna or the animals or, tagging things, tracking things. That's really cool that you get to do that as a citizen scientist. So those are fun as well. Of course, the river trips are exciting. And if you have never been on a float down the Colorado River, I highly suggest that you try that once in a lifetime. It's an amazing experience. The other things that we offer on occasion with the Field Institute are photography classes, yoga classes, things like that. So there's a lot that you can do in the canyon to experience it with the Field Institute. So we haven't had them in a while because COVID stopped our Field Institute. And we don't have any on the books right now, but they might be coming back in the fall. But those are usually on the rim of the canyon, right? So you're right on the edge of the canyon, overlooking it and doing your yoga poses. You're down dogging it and looking down into the canyon.
So I'm going to be a bit self-serving as a natural world photographer. Tell me more about these photography trips. Do they go right to the rim of the canyon or do they go down into the canyon?
There are both. And again, we haven't had these for a while. They're not on the books right now, but I'm hoping that they come back in the fall. Very popular with well-known nature photographers or Grand Canyon photographers. We also do night sky photography courses as well, because Grand Canyon is an official dark sky park by the International Dark Sky Association. We got certified a couple of years ago. So that type of photography is very specific. I don't know if you do any of that, but it's amazing photography. And the Grand Canyon has some of the darkest skies in the United States to photograph. So sometimes they're on the rim for people who really aren't hikers. And then some of them are integrated into some of the hikes.
When those classes come back, count me in. But it has been said, once you go into the canyon, you fall in love with the canyon. So Mindy, how can people get involved with protecting the canyon for not just themselves, the wildlife there, but for generations to come?
Well, first of all, the leave no trace principles, which you've probably heard before. Make sure that you plan ahead, but that you travel and you camp on durable surfaces. You dispose of your waste properly within the canyon if you're camping. You leave what you find. Do not take things out of don't take rocks or plants or, God forbid, an animal. Minimize your impacts with your campfires. Respect the wildlife. That's a huge one. We have a lot of wildlife that people see up close and personal at the canyon. You'll have elk walk right in front of you. Of course, there's all the little squirrels that try to get your food along the rim. And lots of people get far too close. And an elk can turn around and kick you. And that could kill you. So, and I see people doing it all the time. And it's, first of all, scary for the animals, especially if they've just had babies. And it's scary for the humans because you can get hurt very badly. And I really cannot stress that enough, including what we call the most dangerous animal at Grand Canyon National Park, which are the squirrels and the chipmunks. Because they will bite your hand if you're trying to feed them. Animals can carry rabies. You could be severely injured. And, one other thing I was going to say, not to keep tooting our horn, but Grand Canyon Conservancy, our members support the projects that protect the flora and the fauna and the wildlife, within the park. So if that is something that's meaningful to you, or you visit the canyon, or you just love national parks or plants and animals in general, supporting Grand Canyon Conservancy as a member will help support the science projects, the education projects that we do. We fund the distance learning program with the rangers at the park that brings education about Grand Canyon to kids all over the country in elementary schools and junior highs through virtual reality, through digital, through just a Zoom. And that's all funded by Grand Canyon Conservancy. And for that to keep going, we need that support. So you can go to grandcanyon.org, pretty easy website, and you can join there for as little as $35 a year. Or if you're up at the park, 8 of the stores that are at the park are run by Grand Canyon Conservancy. So if you want to take a souvenir home, a memory of Grand Canyon, make sure to visit one of the Grand Canyon Conservancy stores, because that money, all the money you pay in there, will go right back into the park, as opposed to the stores that are run by the concessionaires, where they're taking a portion of those profits. So if you want to support the park, shop in our stores at the canyon. You could also become a member right there and then and get a discount on your purchase. You will get discounts on your Field Institute trips. So if you want to hike in the canyon, take any of the classes we were talking about, you'll have discounts on that. You will have discounts at stores at other parks across the country. So if you don't live here, you can use your Grand Canyon Conservancy member card at other places, at other parks. You get invited to lots of cool events, whether they're at the park or online, some of which involve the superintendent of the park. You get to meet these people and talk to them and ask them questions. So if parks are your thing, and the environment's your thing, or education is your thing, Grand Canyon Conservancy is a great organization to support. So again, you can go to grandcanyon.org and go to our work and find the Field Institute classes. And you will be able to register for classes or talk to us, or you can email us at GCCFI, that's Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute, GCCFI@grandcanyon.org. Or you can just go to our website and find a phone number the main 800 number and just give us a call.
And that number is 1-800-858-2808. That's 1-800-858-2808. Or visit them online at grandcanyon.org. That's grandcanyon.org. Again, thank you so much to Mindy Riesenberg for joining us today and giving us all that information about the Grand Canyon. She is the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Grand Canyon Conservancy. I'm Roger W. Downs, and book your trip now to the Grand Canyon through StevensonTraveladventures.com. All of these links and more are in the description of this podcast, and we're going to wrap up this episode for today. So, if no one else has told you this yet today, I love you, and I know the good Lord above loves you. He has promised you that, so make sure to count your blessings, because he truly is good and a forgiving God who loves you. And it doesn't matter what you've done, he will forgive you. All you need to do is ask. So until next time, peace, love, and coon dogs, y'all.
Thank you for listening. Visit us online at explorewithrwd.com to discover more about Roger, his photography, podcast, and adventures. Or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Explore with RWD. Remember, we didn't inherit the earth from our parents. We borrow it from our children. May God bless you and yours. Now get outside and go explore. Explore with RWD is produced by Downs Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.